Hi everyone! Welcome back to Bee and Cozy Stitching. Melissa here, and today I'd like to talk to you about the Flying Geese quilt block, which we have back here on the wall next to me. This would be your Flying Geese block. It's that time of year again when all the birds that flew south for the wintertime to escape all the cold, lucky little buggers, unlike the rest of us that had to stick around and freeze, they're starting to come home. And one of my very most favorite happened to be the geese. And apparently I'm not alone in this because the Flying Geese quilt block happens to be one of the most popular quilt blocks in existence today. And you're going to be really hard pressed to find a quilter that doesn't know this block by sight. But in doing this presentation and class, I found out some interesting facts. So let me tell you the bird facts I found out, and then I'll tell you the quilt facts, the quilt block facts that I found out. So geese are one of the only birds that will leave from and come back to the very same exact spot year after year after year. I think that's so cool. It's just amazing. Now, geese are always going to be heard long before they're seen. They have a very distinct honking, and when you do finally get to see them, they're flying in a V formation. And that V formation is really important for a couple reasons. One, because as the birds get tired, they can exchange places and they can go to the rear. And when they're flying in this triangle formation, each one is flying just a little bit higher than the next until you get to the very front. And what they're doing is creating an updraft. And when you create this updraft, you allow the birds that are tired in the back to do more gliding than flapping, if you will. And that way they get to regain their energy and their strength, and it allows the flock to travel 70% farther this way, and they're all well rested and all that good stuff. Now, the other really interesting thing about them is by flying in this V formation, they have better communication and sight line of each other. That's important because they need to be able to communicate back and forth to each other, because when they find that really cool quilt shop, they got to turn quick and they got to go see it and hurry up and grab some of those fat quarter packs. No, not really. But anyway, by flying in that V formation, then they don't fly into each other. They can see each other, and nobody gets left behind that way. And that's kind of near and dear to my heart, being a military mom and wife. Nobody left behind. I think that's the way it should be with all of us. But anyway, now that you have the bird facts, let's talk about some of the quilt facts. Now, the Flying Geese block has been around since the early 1700s, according to the American Folk Art Museum. I had to look quick because I wanted to make sure I got that right for you guys, because that's where I got my facts. And one of the main things you're going to find with the Flying Geese block is that they always use high contrasting fabrics. The triangle, which represents the goose, is either light or dark, and then the squares to the outside, which represents the sky, are either in a light or a dark fabric. By having that high contrast, you always get to see the goose that way. It's also a really good place to showcase those special fabrics that you have. It's also going to create movement and shape in your quilts, and that way you're sure to make a statement. Now, the Flying Geese block is very versatile because you can either use it as a standalone block, you can combine it with other blocks to create a pattern. The Dutchman's Puzzle is the #1 quilt block that always comes up when you Google search Flying Geese, which happens to be this block right here. But you can also combine your Flying Geese for really neat borders and sashings, and you can also take your Flying Geese blocks and combine them with other blocks to create even more fascinating quilts. And hopefully we'll get to see some of those as we progress here with our sample. So with that said, let's head on over to the workshop and let me show you my favorite method for making flying geese. Okay, so my flying geese method is very, very, very simple. So what we need to start out with is our goose fabric. And I'm going to be using the collage fabric that we made in an earlier video. If you missed that, I'll put a link so that you can see how to go ahead and make some collage fabric for yourself. But I wanted to showcase it because it's my special fabric, if you will. So I'm starting with my collage fabric. That's going to be the goose. That's going to be the triangle shape. And then I need to find my sky fabric. And I started with this fabric here because I thought, oh, that is so pretty. I just love it. It's kind of an ombre tie-dyed looking fabric. And I thought, oh, look at that. Won't that make wonderful contrast between the two? Well, I picked my fabrics out at 10 o'clock at night, and I really don't recommend that because you don't have very good light, and you usually have a second source of lighting, and unless you're getting true light bulbs, it's going to distort the colors, and so you're not going to get true colors. And then when you look at them in the morning, they look completely different, completely different. So, we're going to back up a step, and with my collage fabric, I'm going to cut my squares. Now, I want to make 8-inch flying geese. So my center squares need to be 9¼ inch. Sorry, I'm looking at my pattern quick if my head got in the way. So you're going to want to cut your collage fabric down to 9¼ inches. And then once you have your squares cut down to 9¼ inches, then you're going to make 2 diagonal cuts. And I'm going to just do this for the sake of what we're trying to accomplish here. And when I say diagonal cuts, I mean you're going to line up your ruler from corner to corner and you're going to cut. Without moving anything, then you're going to line up from this corner to this corner and you're going to make a second cut. So when you take those pieces apart, this is what you're left with. You have 4 very distinct triangle pieces because you've cut from corner to corner here and you've cut from corner to corner here, lining your rulers up with the corners and then cutting next to your ruler. So now that we have our flying geese shape, I went ahead and I cut my squares. Now my squares are 4 7/8 inch, and then they're cut in half on the diagonal. So if I start with a square, like that, again, I'm going to line up my ruler from corner to corner, and I'm going to cut right through the middle. So when you pull it apart, this is what I'm left with. And my cutting isn't my issue, but when I put my sky next to my goose, because this is my block, do you see what's happening now? I have selected a medium value fabric for my sky, and my collage fabric is reading at a medium value as well. So that's not giving us really good contrast. So my next thought was, okay, if I'm not going to be using this fabric, then I have some green fabric, because green and pink and red, that always works fantastic, right? And I'm going to put one of each here because my collage fabric is both red and pink. Good, you can see that. So then I thought, okay, pickles and ice cream, here we go. So let's put a green in there. And while the green is pretty, do you see what's happening again? Again, I've picked a medium value fabric, even though it has white and light in it, and I have medium value geese, so I'm not getting that contrast that I'm looking for. So now I'm thinking, okay, I can't seem to make it work with the color. And this is the problem I have every time that I personally quilt. I always select medium value fabrics. So I never get to go with my first choice. I have to let it sit overnight, and then I have to go back and choose again. So then the next thing I did was I thought, okay, I'm going to put a gray in here because that will give me more contrast, and that'll be better. I'll get to see my geese more. But I went and did it again. The gray that I picked out on first try is again a more medium tone than a lighter tone. And when you're making your flying geese, you want high contrast fabrics. So I went back again, and this time I've got it. I've got a gray that has a little bit of a darker gray to it, almost a little black running through it, but it's primarily a white background. Now do you see how well the geese pop right up off of my fabric? So this is what I'm going to go with, and this is what I'm going to put together. I'm going to cut all of my sky from this lighter colored fabric, and then all of my geese I'm going to cut out of my collage fabric that I made. And once I get all of these pieces cut apart, then I have to start sewing them together. When I sew them together, it's very simple. I'm going to line up the bottom, and I'm going to line up the edge. And you can see that this corner matches perfect, but this corner up here, there is a very long overhang up here. And that's okay, because once we've sewn this, we're going to flip it back, and we need some extra room across the top in order for our block to be rectangular in shape. Now, a flying geese is noted because it's twice as long as it is high. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go over to the sewing machine, and we're going to attach these corner triangles, and you can do them chain style. You can do them one at a time. Whatever method works for you. If you like to chain piece, go for it. Feed one right after the other until you get them all done. To make a flying geese block, you should probably have two of them together, unless, of course, you're just making a border, and then you can go it one at a time. But I'm not really sure what I'm going to make yet. It's going to kind of have to be born as we go along. I seem to have a habit of doing that because I like to dig my stuff out of the scrap bin, and I don't necessarily have yardage when I do that. I'm kind of stuck with whatever we have. I have to make it work. So with that said, we're going to go over to our sewing machine. We're going to line up here and do our 1/4 inch seam from this end to this end, and we're going to do all of the flying geese pieces that we want to do, and then we'll come back over here for the next step. So I'll meet you over at the sewing room.
Okay, so now we're over by the sewing machine. We've got our pieces together. We've lined up across the bottom and along the side, and now we're going to sew our 1/4 inch seam right down our block to the very end. And we're going to continue to do this until we have all of our pieces and parts finished. Then once we have all of our pieces and our parts finished, we're going to come back, we're going to do the same thing along the opposite side. So, and hopefully you can see my stitching, because I put in a darker thread and a contrasting thread in the bobbin, and that way you could see both. So now, when we flip up our block, do you see we have what we call a dog ear up here? That can be trimmed off. And normally you're going to go ahead and you're going to press these, or at least I think you are, with an iron. but for the sake of what we're trying to do here, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to trim off my dog ear and get rid of that because we don't need it. And now I'm going to take the other side, and again, we're going to line up along the bottom and along the side. And again, you can see this side fits really well, or maybe you can't see. Okay, there we go. This side fits really well, and this side again, it has overhang, and that's exactly what we want to happen. So the bottom lines up and the angle lines up. Now, when you're doing your flying geese in this method, do be careful because you are working on the bias and it will stretch out. So you want to make sure that you don't manhandle it too much, and provided that you don't, you're going to have some pretty good success. So don't worry, it'll come out lovely. But I do like making my flying geese this way. I find that it's pretty easy to get it done. And then before you know it, you have a whole flock of your own geese. Oh, that worked out perfect. There was a little V in there, and we ended up coming right off, right in that little V. I just love when that happens because, you know, it's not often that I get something that turns out really, really nice. So then when you flip it up and you give it a press, you have your flying geese block. Now, I'm trying to move this so that you can get a view of the whole thing. You can see that we have that extra fabric up here. We needed a 1/4 inch up here so that a 1/4 inch up here, get my big fingers out of the way so you can see. We don't want to lose the point, the front of our geese formation. So by having a 1/4 inch overlapping up here, which is why we had the extra fabric coming up at this end, by doing that, when we come back in with our 1/4 inch seam, we won't lose our point that way, and it'll turn out really, really nice. So I'm pretty excited about that. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up my geese, and then I'm going to get these all pressed, and then I'll meet you back over at the cutting table, and we'll go on to the next part.
Okay, so now comes the fun part. We've sewn together our flying geese, and I ended up with 16 of these. And I think they turned out just fabulous. And I am so happy with the sky background fabric that I've chosen. But now comes the tough part, because now we need to decide what we want to do with the layout with our flying geese. So we could do something like this. And I'm just going to give you a couple different examples so that you can see. We could do something like that. That's kind of a cool layout. We can do a regular row. And this is good if we're going to do borders or sashings, depending on, you know, the size of our flying geese. If you're going to do a sashing, you would want a much smaller goose. But for what I'm trying to do, that was like the perfect size. So we could do normal like rows where we could use it in borders. We could use this where we have kind of a block thing going on. We can do, I hope we can do it. I don't know if I have enough blocks to get us there, but we can also do the typical Dutchman's puzzle, which is one of the most popular patterns. When we do a Google search, seems to be a favorite. Okay, so, oh good, we do have enough. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay, so we could do a Dutchman's puzzle variation. See that little pinwheel thing going on in here? I'm going to move you so you can get a better view. There we go. Okay, so that's just 3 different arrangements that we can do in a limited amount of time. So hopefully you have been inspired to make yourself a flock of geese and spend some time at your design wall trying to figure out how you would like to lay them out. There's many, many different ways to go ahead and lay them out. I mean, you've seen the 3 that we tried and just like that. So yeah, I'm so excited. I hope that you will give this a try, especially use up some of that collage fabric that you've tried to make. And if you haven't tried to make it, there's a link down below so that you can see how we did it, so you can make some of your own collaged fabric. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in with us today. We really do hope we've inspired you to go and create something today. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below, and don't forget to tap on that little bell so that you're notified every time we come up with a new video. And with that, thank you. Have a great day. Bye for now.